Okay, let's start. Good afternoon, everyone, to this GEO TREES meeting. The reason for this GEO TREES meeting is that we wanted to inform a bit the community about what GEO TREES is, where we stand, what we do. We have been in contact with many people or with many participants here in the room, but also online over the last months to set this project up. And we thought it's a good idea to give you a brief update on what we do. Maybe for those of you who are not fully aware, we are currently organizing a big workshop here in Toulouse, and we thought we organized this GEO TREES meeting back to back. And to give you an overview. We have 4 talks, 4 presentations. So Jérôme will give you a brief introduction to GEO TREES, a summary of what we do. Then we have Nicolas telling us a bit about the challenges of going to the tropical forest and why it's so important to work with local people who know what they do, and also to justify a bit why we need all these resources and why it's so important to get this running. Then we have 1 presentation from Israel. So from the very beginning of GEO TREES, we always said it's not only, it's one thing very important to work with the local communities working in the field, but we also said that putting all this project on the shoulders of one organization does not work, so we need to share a bit the responsibilities, and we need to engage also the space agencies, and they have to contribute. And one of the nice examples of how this could work is ISRO, and Anouk will give us a brief overview of what they are doing currently in ISRO and what they set up in terms of forest monitoring and validation data sets. And last but not least, we have Stuart Davis from the Smithsonian Institution. So they actually got a nice donation from the Bezos Earth Fund, and he will tell you a bit more about this and how we are going to deal with this. So with this, I leave the floor to Jérôme to start with his overview presentation.
Thank you, Klaus. Can you hear me now? Yeah? So I don't need more mics. Do I? Oh, okay. So I need to go back one. Okay, so yeah, we will talk today about this GEO TREES initiative, which is part of the group of Earth observation, GEO, and this is one of the initiatives of GEO. We are a group, we've been quite active over the past couple of years. Co-authors are close people who just talk. Stuart Davis will talk in a few moments. Oliver Phillips from University of Leeds, Camille Pipeneux-Laroche from CIRAD, and Iris, who is organizing a lot of the activities here from CNRS in Toulouse with me. Yeah, let me move forward. So the context, as Klaus was saying, is that the space agencies have made a great investment in missions, in satellites. It costs a lot of money, and the challenge is to find an equivalent, a proportion of these funds to actually make sure that this investment is true. Is valid, can be validated on the ground, and it turns out it's not so trivial for a quantity such as biomass. So ESA will launch the Biomass Earth Explorer mission and supports the global mapping of forest biomass through a number of projects. And as you know, also a number of other space agencies are engaged in the comparable initiatives. NASA and ISRO are engaged in the NISAR mission. JEDI is also has been launched in 2018, and JAXA is launching another mission, ALOS 4. So combination of opportunities here. And so all of these missions and this community have shared interest in having good quality information on the ground. So the question is how to go about this. In the past, we have discussed this. I'd like to provide a couple slides to discuss some technicalities for the CEOs, the Committees for Earth Observation of Satellites. They clearly distinguished calibration phase and the validation phase. In a part of this distinction is trivial. The calibration of the instrument, the physical instrument itself, should be calibrated by some technology that is independent of the question we're asking today. But a number of the algorithms that will be used to produce the products themselves will need to be calibrated with some sort of ground data. So making sure that along the way we don't confound and conflate the calibration phase and the validation phase is very important and goes overlooked. So hence the slide today. There is this concept of fiducial reference measurement, which is defined as the suite of independent ground measurement that provide the maximum return on investment for a satellite mission by delivering to users the required confidence in data products in the form of independent validation results and satellite measurement uncertainty estimation over the entire end-to-end duration of a satellite mission. That was a long sentence. That's sort of a definition that I'll leave here for future reference, but this is exactly what we want to achieve within the GEO TREES program. We want to provide this sort of fiducial reference measurements that comply with this definition, and it's obviously a challenge in itself. So we've built this idea of coming up with a strategy not in one day. Obviously, we've been talking with the GEDI science plan, science group people, and we've been talking with also the NISAR people, and we had a number of very important meetings back in 2016, for instance, in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and a number of others in Switzerland and in Italy, and we proposed the creation of a forest biomass reference system, which was at the outset an equitably and sustainably funded system of recurrent site-based measurement that will serve as a lasting interface between the Earth observation agencies and the ground-based tree-by-tree measurement initiatives. At that time, we even went as far as calling that initiative the fourth mission. After GEDI, NISAR, and biomass, we would need a fourth mission, a ground mission, to go on the ground and do these measurements, which would be at the same scale in terms of funding and money as the other missions, in the order of 100 millions or so. So, and the infrastructure is designed to be a common good for the entire Earth observation community. A number of us and groups produced under the leadership of Laura Duncanson, Matt Disney, and others, above ground biomass product validation good practice protocol that was published in 2021, and it was really an important reference document to buttress this concept. Now, the concept itself is, which I'm going to explain now, is that this biomass reference system is implemented as a limited number of well-studied long-term research sites. This model is not new. If you know the LTER system, NEON in the US, the Australian Supersite Network was exemplary in this respect. It's been going on in many places in the world, and there is a clear need for intensive research sites for many activities, not only for biomass, obviously. And I'm showing this mountain here to show that this is maybe one of the approach to the problem, not the only one. At the base of the mountain, we also have a need for national forest inventories and this type of approaches. Of the needs we have, we need tree inventories that should be precisely geolocated. That is critical for our applications. In the past, botanical experts or ecologists have been less pressed for this type of data, so it's really some of the data we need to acquire precisely. The sites should be attached to a local institution for many practical aspects, including budget related. The local PIs should be actively involved in the data acquisition strategy. The engagement strategy should rely on long-term agreements, and I'll explain what is the vision for that. And GEO TREES must build upon existing plot networks. Wherever possible, ground activities should actively involve remote sensing agencies as well, and complement national activities, as I say. So there is another GEO activity called GFOI, which is not competitive by any means. It's really intended to take up some of what we will be doing in GEO TREES, but really bring it at the level of governments and nations and complementary to the NFIs. So the concept is one thing. The implementation itself is what we propose in this slide. Classical forest censuses, 10 times 1 hectare would be minimal, statistically speaking, to represent the biomass over a landscape. We also need a component of upscaling. 10 hectares is not a lot of forest over an entire landscape, so we need to upscale this. And one of the best means today available in terms of the technology is airborne LiDAR. So airborne could be borne by an aircraft, it could be a drone. These technologies are changing over time, and we are really very interested in these technical aspects of what will be the best strategy, which may be varying across continents and across countries. And this is a point we should discuss down the line. Terrestrial LiDAR and UAV LiDAR could also be very important to access some sort of a gold standard in terms of biomass estimation, because it would be much more precise than the classical forest inventory approach and allometric equations. So all this together is the core concept of GeoTrees. How do we want to implement this? Well, our goal, our primary goal and only goal actually, is to validate remote sensing products globally. So we want to have the global representativeness of the sites. And you see the statistical analysis conducted by Nicolas Labrière and co-authors shows that all the dots here would make a good network covering boreal forests, temperate forests, and tropical forests alike, all the continents, all forest types and types of biomes as well represented. So the reality will probably be different from that because we have some constraints, geopolitical constraints or opportunities that will arise. But this gives an impression of what we would like to achieve eventually. I'm insisting here that this map is not the current state of the project. It would be fantastic, but it's what we want to aim for in the future, say 5 years. In terms of the deliverables, it's fairly clear and simple. We have now one entry data portal called data.geotrees.org. And we will and already provide quarter hectare scale above ground biomass density and canopy height values as inferred from the plot data themselves. So 10^4 would be 40 points per site. It's not a lot of information, but it's very valuable information. And the upscaling, a full map of above ground biomass data derived by LiDAR and upscaled by LiDAR at every site. So this is already, there is a poster in the conference led by Dmitry Shpashenko, poster 22 if you want to take a look. And it's, this activity is led by YASA in Austria. Now, in terms of the activities, I mentioned that we cannot do that ourselves. It would take an infinity of time to secure the trust and the collaborations with all the actors in many of the countries, including in the global south. So our goal is to build upon the activities that have been are decades old of forest plots, which is a global network of permanent tree inventories, Forest Geo, about which you'll hear more about with Stuart Davis's presentation, and TMFO, which is the Tropical Managed Forest Observatory, which is interesting also because it has treatments. The forests, some of the forests are managed and others are controlled, so it's really interesting from a remote sensing standpoint to see if we can detect those differences. GeoTrees importantly addresses a single very important science question, the forest carbon one. So it's no substitute for these networks. It will not supersede these networks. It's just empowering some of their activities. And so it's in that sense a win-win. And also it's a win-win with respect to the site partners because our model is to provide the funds for data acquisition, something that is very difficult to acquire, especially for remeasurements of the plot. It's always easy to set up a plot the first time. It's always very much more difficult to recensus it afterwards, even though this is the primary interest of a long-term project. So in terms of the structure, we already have worked through the structure. I invite you to go to our website to look into the more detail, and happy to take any questions about this. There are a number of core institutions already involved. I mentioned a number of them. We are trying to be actively collaborate with a number of partners in Earth observation agencies, because they are primarily interested and because they can provide some facilities in different countries, and also with the partnerships that we have established with the SAID partners. I forgot to mention the Australian partners, but they are quite important as well. So finally, a couple of words about the costing model. This does not come for free, as you have imagined. So a first case study suggests that effective cost is around 250,000 euros per site and per campaign for a number of around 50 to 100 sites, times the activity of two measurements in a 10-year cycle. The costing model is around from 50 to 100 million euros. So it's a lot of money, and it's something that it's also pretty impressive in terms of the numbers, but the real challenge here is the implementation. It's not so much the funding. So we are now in the phase where we are looking into the implementation and test cases. So let me finish by explaining where we stand now. I explained the concept development, the contribution of the GEDI science team, which was really important, the fact that GEO Trees was endorsed as a GEO activity a couple of years ago already now, and we started with a phase 0, if you will, as an implementation at 3 test sites, one in French Guiana, one in Gabon, and one in Malaysia. This is part of a ESA-funded project called ForestScan. As you may have heard, 2020 and 2021 were not the best times ever to go in the field and collect data. So it got a bit delayed, but we are getting there. And the phase 1 activity is starting now. So it's really exciting time now with the engagement and deployment plan at up to 30 tropical sites over the next 3 years, engagement of Earth observation agencies, and obviously, the very important step, a milestone, will be the launch of Biomass and NISTAR. Exactly when, we don't know. We are the date of Q1 2025 for Biomass. Let's see if it happens. We'll see about this. Thank you very much for your time, and happy to take questions.
Shall we have questions now, or shall we wait for...
Oh, we can wait, yes.
Yeah. I suggest we wait with the questions to the end of the sessions. We have, at the end, a bit of time. And we move on to the next presentation, which will be Nicolas, right?
Okay, thank you for this invitation, wonderful opportunity. Actually, there are so many things that came to mind while I was preparing this presentation, because calibrating satellite mission, doing field inventory in Africa or elsewhere in the tropics is really what we've been doing for years, and we had so many challenges coming along the way. So having a broader community engaging in this right now is very exciting for us, because there's so much we would like to discuss and exchange and participate ourselves in this effort. So in Central Africa, when you look at many of these databases and maps of the distribution of ground inventory, very often it looks quite empty, but there are actually a bunch of data that are there. Both scientific plots, for instance, Afriton, which is one of the well-known networks of plots, but with African partners, we also gathered a few, maybe 100 or 200 plots that are scattered here and there. So we are happy to contribute these data sets as well. But when you look at the mountain that Jérôme was describing, so you have these scientific data sets that are there, that are few, scattered around, but better quality maybe. You also have national forest inventories that are starting to develop. For instance, in DRC, on this map, you have these points scattered around Congo and DRC. And you have also a quite untapped data source, which is management forest inventory. So private companies are, by law, required to inventory the resource. And so a few persons, and one especially CIRAD, spent years trying to engage with these private companies to try and gather these incredible data sources. It was estimated that for one person to measure all these plots, it would have taken 1,000 years, actually, because it's millions and millions of trees that have been measured. So just to say that although this data is difficult to use for remote sensing purposes because it's less well located, so the GPS position maybe of the plots is not perfect. There are other issues that we discuss in papers, but they can be used because they can be aggregated maybe at the 1 kilometer square pixel, and they can be used for validation of biomass maps, for instance. So when you look at the available biomass maps on the market, I would say, you have so many discrepancies. And we came to realize, and we published 2 years ago, this analysis showing that maybe part of the problem is the way these maps are validated. So all this discussion is in the CEO's report, is really how do you validate, you use these data to validate maps, and you really have to take into account the autocorrelation, the spatial autocorrelation in these plots. And when we do that same kind of mapping of biomass, we see here on the map on the right that the reliability decreases, collapses after a few kilometers, a few hundred kilometers from the data points. This is when you don't have the fantastic biomass or future missions with the relevant data to extrapolate biomass, maybe. I had added a slide here, but it doesn't show. We are in this effort also to work on these super sites, so small plots scattered around, or as I mentioned, these inventories may not be the best data for space mission calibration. So more and more we work in intensifying data acquisition on sites, on local sites. So like Jérôme said, maybe 10 plots, maybe 20 plots of 1 hectare, a drone acquisition with LiDAR. But also, what I will show now, the slide came here, sorry. Merci, Iris. So these yellow stars are these sites where we're trying to invest with different partners. And so, as Jérôme said, you need to go every now and then remeasure these plots, but also there's a lot you need to know on the variability, the phenology, for instance, of the forest. And so we started this monitoring with drones every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks to really measure over the full extent of these sites, of the variation of the productivity, the photosynthetic capacity, and the properties of the canopy. It's not maybe enough to calibrate a satellite mission to know that at one point in time there was that amount of biomass. You need to know the properties of the canopy, the amount of leaves, and etc. So that's why we're starting in several countries. Just to mention a little bit of advertisement, this paper has been submitted recently with the help of a colleague from the Indian Remote Sensing Institute. But it's an effort where we've been trying to collect data, both from ground data and airborne LiDAR, a bit like the paper by Nicolas Labruyère, trying to produce these AGB maps that can serve for calibration. So it is kind of an effort of making these super sites, but it's just one shot in time. So it's really not as long lasting as what we're trying to do in GEO-Tree, but it's already something. Also, when you just discussing about wild opportunities, but in these super sites, we're discussing about ground plots, maybe a canopy height model, so mapping biomass using LiDAR, but just based on the height of the canopy. But there's so much more that we can possibly do with LiDAR, which is just a precious data with a penetrating, like a radar, characterizing the three-dimensional structure of the forest. But importantly, we published with Grégoire Vincent this paper recently. When you start to compare sites with each other, you will realize that you use airborne and different drones with different properties on the LiDAR, and you will realize that maybe comparing the vertical profile of vegetation between these sites is problematic. Even with a single airborne laser, if you fly at different altitude or different power of the laser, different sensitivities, you will end up with different profile and detectability of objects. So in this test, we had the chance of flying with different drone sensors and airborne sensors on Parakou, French Guiana, and we were able to intercalibrate. The take-home message is that you can intercalibrate these profiles, but you need to fly them at least at once on the same side at different altitude, different power. So we don't have the capabilities yet to model the effect of wavelength, power, and all these properties of the LiDAR that often are black boxes that we don't even know from the providers how they work actually. So we have this AMAPVOX software that can allow to take it into account variation in sampling densities and other properties of the scanner, but others we cannot, and we have to intercalibrate manually. On this project, I mentioned these observatories by drone to monitor phenology. So we're now able to both monitor leaf aging and with standard RGB drones or multispectral drones, so you can detect when, when the leaves are shedding their leaves, and so maybe losing the photosynthetic capacity, but also measure the leaf area with the drone LiDAR and this vegetation profile, like you can see on the right for one single tree. So the variation in time of the leaf area within the crown, and that corresponds to the dates where we see that the leaves shed its leaf on the left. So, and we realized that with classical spaceborne products for LAI, for instance, most of the time you actually measure leaf age but not leaf area. So with that kind of data, we'll now be able to maybe calibrate better products. As Jérôme mentioned, in this GEO-Tree observatory, there's a lot of room for improving the ground data itself, maybe using terrestrial laser scanners, improving the allometries, how you predict a tree mass or a plot mass. And in this study, with a colleague Olivier Martin, we tried different pipelines for processing these terrestrial laser scanning data, including manually. So we have teams that are helping us in Cameroon, for instance, of people dedicating to manually clean and separate leaf and wood and individual trees. So that serves as a reference data set against fully automated deep learning approaches. And we can try to see where we can cut costs maybe on these pipelines, but where we also need an intensive human input still at this stage. And interestingly, in this study, he showed that maybe just at the isolating tree stage, when you're trying to separate the different trees in the forest from the terrestrial laser scanning, you can improve the accuracy by a factor 10, just by checking that the trees were correctly separated. So for these studies, we're involved also in this forest scan project funded by ESA, where it's really the goal is to gather data on several sites, like Parakou in French Guiana that I showed, Lope in Gabon, and Sepilok in Malaysia. So bringing the best efforts of the community to gather both ground data, the best quality ground data, terrestrial laser scanning, and UAV and airborne LiDAR scanning, really to gather this data, make it available to the community first, and also try to see where we can really improve on the quality at every step from the ground to the extrapolation to improve these super sites we're aiming to develop. And so one of the objectives, for instance, is to see if we will be able to efficiently use drone-based lasers instead of plane-based, and how we combine the terrestrial laser scanning with the ground traditional ground data. So the paper is in preparation, and we have an important meeting next month. But okay, so that was a bit. It's not very structured, but had ideas going in all directions. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicolas, for showing a bit that, well, one challenge is collecting the trees on the ground, and Jérôme has mentioned the cost related to this, but it's not only this, it needs to be complemented by other technologies as well, and there's a lot of challenges attached to that. And to make this available to the Earth observation community, you also have to put some effort into processing the data and correcting the data, I think, which is very important. The next presentation will be given by Anup Das from ISRO, and he will shed a bit of light on the agency perspective. And I have to say, ISRO is really leading this. I mean, it's making a great example how you can do and what space agencies should do and invest, because we commit to deliver this product, so we also have to commit to validate them. And I think ISRO was really doing a great job over the last years to set up a national network. And Anup will explain a bit more about this and how they are going to share this data with us. Anup, the floor is yours. You can start presenting. Anup, we don't hear you. Maybe you... We see the screen, but we don't hear you. We have tested with Anup before, so it worked before. Huh?
No. Click the three little points on the left in WebEx. Yeah.
On the layer panel, if you click the 3 points, yes. If you do switch audio, maybe you can, on switch audio, you might have the options to, where on the right? No, on the right, there's this symbol next to your user, yes, exactly. And there you can test maybe somewhere, speaker. Yeah, maybe you can try another option here. Hello? Do you hear us? Yes. Hello, Anup. Do you hear us? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. it's strange because we tried it before. And it was working perfectly before. Maybe you switch off the headset and try the computer audio. Yes. Shall we take Stuart first while Anup is trying to make it work? Maybe Anup, we continue with Stuart. Stuart, if you're ready, and then in the meantime, Anup can try to fix his sound problems.
Klaus, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well. Yes. Okay, then we swap to Stuart, and Stuart will give a presentation of a network perspective, so how these big networks that we engage can contribute and how they can also benefit from GEO trees, maybe.
Okay, can you see my presentation, Klaus?
Yes, but it's not in presentation mode, I think. It's still in the PowerPoint mode.
Yeah, 1 second. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks very much, Klaus. I'm hoping everyone can hear me well. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much, Jerome and Klaus, for inviting me to speak. So as Jerome mentioned, back in 2016, a group of 3 Earth observation missions, Biomass, NISAR, and JEDI, got together in Washington, D.C. with a group of or representatives of several of the tropical forest networks. And a lot of the focus of that discussion was around this picture of Day Schimmels, which shows that while most of the biomass and vegetation and diversity in plant communities is in the tropics, there's a dearth of inventory plots that can be used as a reference for Earth observations. And as Jerome mentioned, there was a call for a 4th mission, which would bring together the ground observations in the tropics in order to bridge that gap. But actually, as it turns out, the ecological community in the tropics had been working very hard for many decades on the establishment of plots in tropical forests for the purposes of ecological, biogeographic, and evolutionary studies. And this NSF funded us a while ago to bring together some of those networks to discuss issues around the science of tropical forests. And here I've just put a table up of 11 of those networks, which are working across the tropics. And what you see is they cover lots of countries. They cover many different ecotypes and forest types, lowlands, uplands, mixed forest, managed and primary forest, degraded forest. And so there's actually a significant amount of research had been going on in tropical forests with inventory plots that could be extremely useful to scaling observations to the pantropics and ultimately the globe. And this network of 11 sites is really significant. 11,000 plots in 56 countries we characterized in that study, in that project. And not all of them are permanent, not all of them are have the trees tagged and mapped, but there's still a significant number of them that do. They represent all 4 major areas of tropical forest, include at least 50% of the world's tree species, they're complementary from an ecosystem and land use coverage perspective, and many of the sites have additional data on traits and soils and physiology and meteorology and so on. And importantly, these networks have independently developed international partnerships and collaborations that foster training, capacity strengthening, and other initiatives. And so these multi-network collaboration really provides an important opportunity for, in several different ways, research to improve the understanding of tropical forest biomass stocks and fluxes, obviously, and to predict how they will respond to and drive future changes in the Earth system. This would be greatly accelerated by increased multi-network collaboration. None of the networks is sufficiently extensive or intensive to provide pantropical coverage, and therefore, collaboration would be essential. Many tropical regions urgently need additional capacity strengthening to help address the challenges that forests face, so furthering the opportunities in collaboration. Sustaining these ground observations for all of these networks is extremely challenging, as I think several people have mentioned. And so, but I believe this will be fostered greatly by further collaboration and coordination. And critically, a multi-network collaboration could form the basis of a global reference system for tropical forest biomass, and hence the concept of GeoTrees evolved. And I'm not going to repeat what Jerome went through, but GeoTrees is a global biomass, a global biomass reference system for forests. At the moment, we're envisioning this, as Jerome said, as 100 core sites, roughly 60 in the tropics, 40 in the temperate zone, coupled with a series, perhaps as many as 200 supplementary lower cost sites that would help us fill the gaps in the ecological and dimensions over which tropical forests occur. It's designed to represent the main environmental and anthropogenic dimensions over which forests occur globally, with the highest sampling intensity in the critical carbon-rich tropics. The existing partner networks that I just described that have been established by these independent networks will allow us to layer most of the GeoTree sites on existing forest monitoring plots. That's hugely valuable in providing historical baselines and benefiting from these existing partnerships in skills and knowledge. The capacity to identify trees in the tropics is an incredible challenge. And sharing capacity skills among these networks with the Earth observation community will provide a great opportunity for GeoTrees to succeed. Recently, we're really super excited to announce that we were awarded a $12 million grant by the Bezos Earth Fund to really move from Jerome's phase 0 into phase 1, where GeoTrees will be the world's first global ground-based open access, equitably developed forest biomass reference system. Our initial plan is a 10-year plan, and the first phase of this has been, as I said, just supported by the Bezos Earth Fund. It's important to note that this phase and all the phases in our planned GeoTrees initiative are also being supported by a really significant amount of in-kind collaborative co-funding from many institutions, including my own at the Smithsonian. In the first phase of this project, we're planning for 100 core sites to be identified and selected, carry out a bunch of training and science workshops. Data, as Jerome mentioned, the data portal will be developed further. 30 core tropical sites will be established and implemented, and we will be implementing a fellowship and training program across the network of sites. The core elements of the BEF support for GeoTrees are as follows. Jerome mentioned the innovative technologies that we're using, a combination of TLS, ALS, and with the ground plots following CEOS recommendations. Second is partnerships, engagement, and training. GeoTrees relies on the existing partners, and therefore the very strong representation of all stakeholders, capacity exchange, fellowships, and fair funding for all partners is really essential in making this program a success. Broad environmental sampling is important. Current accurate estimates of carbon and biomass stocks in mature, degraded, and secondary forests, representing the main environmental and anthropogenic dimensions over which tropical forests occur. We have a long-term commitment. Long-term measurements will ensure accurate assessment of forest carbon stocks and fluxes and ensure the continued engagement and participation of partners throughout the system. We make a commitment to open access data through this program. This is a commitment to equitably produce and openly shared global forest biomass reference measurements that can be used by the open science community. High quality, dynamic, high resolution forest data will be made open to all in as near real time as possible. In BF, in the phase 1 core activities, which I've already partly mentioned, we'll be implementing the first 30 GeoTree sites. We'll have annual in-person workshops and virtual meetings and public webinars that will share knowledge among the participants in this program with the broader science community. There'll be postdoctoral fellowship opportunities, international exchange fellowships and internships, and training for early career scientists. In all of these dimensions, we're really interested in the ways that we can work across the disciplines that are involved, from the Earth observation disciplines through to the plant ecological disciplines in the field. Bringing together those skills through internships and fellowships is really a very high priority, and we encourage people in the community to reach out to us and work with us on broadening participation in this program. So our current GEO Trees activities, as Jerome somewhat mentioned, is selecting, in the first 5 years, we'll be selecting the first 30 sites and implementing them with all the measurements you heard about. We'll be building partnerships across ground, TLS and ALS researchers and networks to enhance the quality and veracity of the science we're trying to do. Planning of workshops and training initiatives is starting to get underway, and we're strengthening the governance structure and stakeholder representation in GEO Trees to ensure that this is really a tropical, motivated, and global initiative. Looking forward, just briefly, we're hoping to secure resources to reach our vision of 100 core sites and 200 supplementary sites. That requires significant fundraising on all of our parts. We're looking to build links across other disciplines and applications for forest biomass and carbon assessment. The Earth observations community is not the only ones that are concerned about having a biomass reference system. The modeling community is extremely excited about using these kind of open data as both benchmarks, but also for improving the models that are being used to predict the future of forests. We're interested in local and jurisdictional carbon and biomass assessments and contributing to those in the partner countries where GEO Trees is active. And of course, we're interested in looking at how GEO Trees can leverage and be involved in some of a more transparent set of operations in carbon market activities. But thirdly, and perhaps a little bit more broadly, we're really interested to explore partnerships with the Earth observation community focused on biodiversity assessment and monitoring. Lots of new satellite and spaceborne instruments are being developed right now in Europe, in North America, that will be focused on more directly on both biodiversity itself, but also functional characteristics of ecosystems. And we're very excited because of the strength of the networks underlying GEO Trees, the biodiversity assessments that these groups have been doing, as I said, for over the last couple of decades, really provides a great opportunity for GEO Trees to become almost biodiversity trees, in the sense that we could be both a biomass and a biodiversity reference system for the world's forests. And I'll just finish with an acknowledgement of all the many, many partners involved in getting GEO Trees off the ground. It involves many countries, as I've mentioned, and many partners in the north, but also most importantly in the south. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Again, we will wait for questions for the end of the sessions. We try again with Anup. There was also a question from one participant. The chat is muted for everyone, so you will be unmuted at the end of the presentation sessions. Okay? Be patient with your questions.
Thanks, Klaus.
Anup, can we try again? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. So let us start.
You just need to share your screen again.
Yes. Is it visible? Can you come?
Yes. We see your screen, but not in presentation mode. Now it's perfect. You can start. Thank you.
Okay. So, okay. I'm sorry about that hiccup. Actually, it was working earlier, but I don't know what happened. I'll just brief about the ISRO's biomass mapping activity. let us look at some background about forest carbon estimation in India. In India, we have some 21.71% of forest of our geographical area, and we have an agency, that is Forest Survey of India, that is responsible for enumerating all this forest data, forest cover, as well as species level information there, and any change in forest cover there. And since 2011, the FSI is also quantifying the carbon stored in forests, both AGB, BGB, deadwood, litter, and soil carbons. And if you look at these images here, the maps here, the left-hand side shows the forest type map of India. It has 16 broad vegetation types with many subtypes in the vegetation, and each vegetation type is enumerated separately using inventory plots, and you can look at the location of the NFI plots, that is typically FSI collects every 2 years and complete a cycle in 6 years and revisit this plot every 6 years. So typically these NFI plots are circular plots of 60-meter diameter, and it's within the 60-meter, the vegetation parameters are collected, qualitative information is collected like land use, crop composition, and other things. And within the 60-meter, there are smaller plots, 4 plots typically within 1 plot of 8-meter radius, where these the tree measurements take place, like stem diameter and tree height, other things. So these NFI data is the backbone of estimating forest carbon through a ground-based methodology. A schematic is shown here, like it takes information of forest cover and forest type. With this, makes a stratification using this cover and type, then overlay these NFI plots, and this compute the woody biomass using species-specific local allometric models and other components of this forest that contributes to the biomass, and it finally generates the forest carbon stock. And if you look at these numbers here, the total forest carbon stock estimated for the year 2021 is 7.2 billion tons, and there has been seen a consistent increasing trend from 2011 to 2021 to the forest carbon in India. And very recently in 2019 onwards, due to the availability of synthetic aperture radar data, these biomass forest AGB maps were created using NFI as the source data, and SAR, L-band, and in many places C-band SAR as input data. And this right one shows a forest AGB map generated by 2019. This is basically generated by our group in ISRO with the help of FSI. So ISRO is recently it is contributing to the estimation of forest above ground biomass through the SAR-based technology, and with the launch of NISAR, which is planned next year, there will be a complete transformation from the ground-based measurement to space-based measurements for forest AGVs. And in NISAR, there are 2 major objectives related to forestry. That is the forest above ground dry biomass estimation at a hectare scale within a forest biomass density of 100 megagram per hectare, and also the vegetation disturbance wherever the forest has changed of the order of 50%. So you can see 2 examples here. The forest biomass map of one of the Indian states of Karnataka showing here, and the forest disturbance in the in a part of Assam state, where in the hilly regions the shifting cultivation takes place, where the forests are cleared for agriculture, and again the vegetation is regrown as forest. So those kind of disturbances also is being monitored using SAR data. And this one shows one example with, where the change in forest biomass over a period of time uh, is shown here. And from this type of analysis, the overall gain or loss in forest biomass can be monitored. Earlier, the change in forest cover were the criteria to see any forest disturbance there. But later on, it was observed that even within the without changing the forest cover, the change in forest biomass also results into disturbances, which is very important to give attention. So such kind of activities were started recently. So through this process, in order to validate our forest AGV products, we are establishing the permanent validation sites in India. If you look at the India map here, the green color shows the existing forest cover, and the sites typical the forest validation sites are distributed here as 1 to 9. There are 9 sites, and they capture more or less the entire type of vegetation that is present in India, barring few regions in the northern hill regions. We have not yet established any sites there, and these sites basically capture the vegetation characteristics of various types. You can see there are very huge trees. They present as the tropical evergreen forests in the very high rainfall region, and there are also very scattered trees in the dry lands, like forests in Gujarat. And there are plantation trees mostly found in the foothills of Western Ghats and the central and eastern India. And there are also hilly vegetations. They are found in the hills and valleys in the southern India. And of course, there are alpine vegetation, there are mangroves, and there are a savanna kind of vegetation. All kind of vegetation has been represented through this site selection. These sites are basically our regular sites where we used to collect various data, and these are historically developed sites. Now, within these sites, we are laying 1 hectare sized inventory plots with some institutional participations, and we are collecting the inventory data. We are following the CEOS LPB protocol that is designed exclusively for this project, and this caters to this nicer and biomass products also. We measure the tree height, tree girth, then the tree species and number of stems at breast heights level, and the tree canopy density also we measure using LAI type of measurements. Then we also measure the wood density and the soil moisture benefit canopy, and we are collecting high resolution aerial photo and LiDAR data geosynchronous to the ground measurements. So this is a typical layout of our plots. You can see we have the north aligned square shaped 1 hectare plots, and within these plots we divide these plots into 9 subplots, 1/9 of these plots, and we do the inventory in this direction: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And for general deciduous forests, and wherever the forest is very dense and inaccessible, we collect only 4 subplots, that is, and 4 corners like this. And we do all kind of measurements as per this protocol. And one typical example for the state of Karnataka, part of Shimoga district, is shown here. In this forest type, we have laid 10 1-acre plots, and you can see the bottom images showing the high resolution optical data collected to drone, and with the LiDAR data, you can see the top of the canopy point density here. This representing the tree height, and you can see some snapshots here. So, typically, for every subplot, we have inventory data collected, and LiDAR and high resolution optical. And if you put all these plots information here, then we have completed 5 sites out of these 9, namely Shimoga, Yellapur in Karnataka district, then Nilambur in Kerala district, Hoshangabad in central India, Madhya Pradesh, then Haldwani in the northern state of Uttarakhand. And these are the subplot level biomass densities put here. Here, if you look at this color scheme, then this green color basically indicates the low biomass forests, and red color has higher biomass, yellow being the medium size. Our intention is to collect plots of lower biomass that cater to the nicer, because L-band and S-band system, it has saturation at a biomass level of 100 or maybe 120 megagrams. So we intend to inventory plots with that kind of biomass densities. But invariably, there are many areas where the large trees are there, and we'll end up with high biomass plots also. And this is the current status of our long-term 1-acre inventory plots in India. Out of these 9 sites, we have collected inventory over 5 sites, and 4 sites are pending to be collected. It is timed actually with nicer launch. Rest of the plots will start collecting the data during October to March period. And the Indian forest basically, the access to the forest closed during June to September month. So that is the period when we don't go to the forest. And since from October 2023 to next year March, we will be collecting all this data. And okay, these are some site level informations. Like for Hoshangabad, our plot distribution is something like this. We have 10 number of 1-acre plots inventoried here within the region, and this plot level brief statistics of the number of trees, number of species, with the average tree height and average DBH, and biomass density is listed here. This area is basically tropical dry deciduous and dry evergreen vegetation with lower to medium biomass. This is very much suitable for L-band type of solutions. And these red color boxes are basically identified for LiDAR data collection that will be due later this year. And the size of these boxes are written here. So these boxes are designed to cover as many inventory plots possible. And since we are collecting through a drone-based LiDAR, so we cannot extend this area to a large box. So we get typically 2 to 5 kilometer dimension boxes. This is another site, Yellapur, Karnataka, where we have relative higher biomass vegetation. The plot distributions of 10 1-acre plots are there. This is the region in Karnataka, and the articles are there. There are basically, you can see within a hectare, the number of species can go up to 42, as mentioned in one of the places. And these are the regions where the tropical evergreen forests are there, and the species density and the variability is very, very high there. And these are the regions identified for LiDAR data collection. And this is another region in Karnataka, Shimoga. This 10 or 1 hectare plot details are there. This region basically characterized by plantation forests, and vegetation is tropical moist deciduous, dry deciduous, and semi-evergreen type. We have natural forests also, but the majority of this area is plantation forests. So species diversity is low there. And this is Nilambur in Kerala district. Here also these forests are of medium to high biomass. You can see a lot of high biomass plots appear here, and the distribution of 10 plots and distribution of areas where LiDAR data is intended to be collected is shown here. Then these are the plots in the Haldwani district of Uttarakhand, where we have inventory 25 number of 1 hectare plots. These are basically the regions of various plantations, and here also the number of trees are very, very high, considering wherever there are young plantation areas, and the biomass is low to medium. And here we have planned for LiDAR data collection like this. Then there are places like Karbi Anglong in Assam district, where we have not yet inventoried, but we have marked all these 1 hectare plots, 10 number of 1 hectare plots, and focus for LiDAR data collection. And we will do this in the month of October. And you can see the vegetation distribution here. Here the forest is mostly semi-evergreen and riverine vegetation, and bamboo forest is also dominant. Then we have forests in Gujarat state. These are very low biomass forests. Like in the eastern side, it is Api forest, and western side it is big forest. These are of low biomass forests. So we intend to collect data during October to March 2024. We have established local collaborations and all things is set. We are just readying ourselves to collect the data here. These are typically the dry deciduous to evergreen forests and with very low biomass. So that is basically, summarize our activities for this forest biomass distribution, and I have given more emphasis on forest biomass product validation rather than the estimation things. That is what I understood from this session, that we are more interested in discussing about collection and sharing of validation data. So I have not put a lot of technicalities on biomass estimation. And with this, I end my presentation here, and I wish a very useful and fruitful partnership between ISRO and GEO TREES, and where exploring modalities to share this data with the community, so that they get access to this type of forests in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anup. Thank you, Anup. I think we can unlock the discussion. Yes, you're all unmuted now. So if there's any question, We have half an hour left. You can ask all the 4 speakers or also comment if you have any comments or make any recommendations. No question, everything clear, or you're already tired? There's one, Martin. Or is it Martin raising the hand?
Yes, I think so. I hope so. Can you see
Yes.
me?
Yes, we see you.
Yeah, very
Beautifully.
nice. I'll take the floor, take the opportunity. No, thanks for the presentations. It's very nice to see, really see a lot of momentum also now that the satellites are being launched. So it's the perfect timing to get systematic acquisitions of all of these data. So very happy to hear about this. One specific question, I think it's mostly to Nicolas, I guess maybe a little bit also to Stuart, is, I mean, Nicolas, you nicely showed some of these, you know, the TLS, the drone base, the various things and the value of that. Some of that is kind of experimental, some of that is a bit more advanced in terms of operationality. Given that now we are seeming to streamline acquisitions, also with the next phase of the GEO trees. So what do you think should be done so we can include this maybe a bit more systematically in the surveys? That they are not the way that's done now, which is more ad hoc and stuff like that, more something a bit more systematic. What do you think needs to be done?
Hi, Martin. Is it to me you're asking that? Thank you. What needs to be done? I think the great thing that maybe Mats could comment on, Matt Disney, is that more and more the Regal scanners that are available on the market are becoming much more efficient to use in the field, and so that you can get an appropriate point cloud right out of the field or in a few days after, and where it used to take maybe a while to scan a whole plot and then to have the data, you know, georeference and all. So that's the first step, the acquisition step, which is improved. And more we'll have automated deep learning approaches that will allow to separate the trees and compute the volume of the wood and maybe separate leaves. So a huge community is working on this at the moment. But my caveat during my presentation was just to say that we need to always stay conscious that we have to check the data along the way. But otherwise, I think the future is quite bright, and the complementarity between ground measured data, tree diameters and tree heights will remain to be really necessary, and these new LiDAR data will increase in the next few years.
Thank you.
Jérôme speaking. I'd like to complement what Nicolas said and invite you, all this community of TLS actors, to a meeting in the forthcoming weeks to discuss this point, technical points, but also implementation points, because we have a lot of questions for you, and we need to sit and discuss them one by one. It takes a bit more than a couple questions here. So yeah, we'll send out an email really shortly and make sure that we are on par and we have the same level of information, and most importantly, make sure also that the field crews that go with TLS go at the same time as the inventory people. That would be really a plus, I think. We'll think so, but it needs coordination, and so we need to think ahead.
Right. I think you're raising an important point, because on the ground plot, I mean, it's very tedious, and we know it's hard to collect this data, but there are people in the field who know how to do this, and they're trained over years and they have experience, whereas for things like TLS and ALS, these automatic pipelines, these protocols are not yet there. This is also why we decided, for example, from the European Space Agency to start very soon a small project where we want to harmonize these protocols a bit and make them more usable. There was one more comment here from Clément, I think, and then Matt Disney raised his hand.
Okay, it was a kind of technological question. So we could see that the ALS can cover large areas, but you get a lot the leaves, and the biomass is more in the trunk and the big branches. And the TLS is sensitive, is measuring that, but it's quite complicated to cover large area with the TLS. Have you investigated, or do you think in the near future it will be possible to use some, I don't know, UAV that will fly below the canopy?
Yeah,
Below the canopy, yeah. That's
no, but it's not a dream. I think this SLAM technology that allows really to get rid of the GPS component, which was annoying, and also artificial intelligence that maybe where the drone can actually use this point cloud that is generating to avoid the obstacles. But so there are products out there already that may allow to use the same scanner for terrestrial scanning and for drone scanning, and so come up with a much better fused project, where before we had to merge very different nature of signals between the terrestrial and the drone-based scans.
No, because I saw some commercial drones that were carrying some collision avoidance system, small LiDAR using the camera and AI. They cost 500 euros. They cannot carry anything, but it's already great public technology. So maybe at a point, bigger drone being able to carry stuff and to navigate, avoid the branches, maybe there will be some accident. But that would be quite impressive.
Matt, I think you raised the hand.
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me, Klaus?
Yes, we hear you and we see you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for the very interesting presentations. And I can just add a couple of comments there. Firstly, to follow up on Martin's question about what needs to be done. One of the things that we found in trying to do the TLS and make consistency with the UAV and sensor stuff is locations. The geolocation is absolutely crucial. So getting the really precise locations of plot corners and where that the individual tree measurements in the census plots, it's not precise at all, because that was not what it's designed for. If we want to link the UAV and the LiDAR up to the satellite data, we have to be able to do that kind of thing much better. So having much more detailed kinematic GPS systems in place, I think that's a crucial thing that underpins a lot of what we want to do if we want to link to satellite data properly. Just on the issue of the UAV question as well, is that there's commercial system. We just saw a demo a couple of weeks ago in White Woods of a LiDAR payload on a drone using collision avoidance, flying under the canopy, leaf on, and covering half a hectare in half an hour, with the kind of quality of data that it's not TLS, but it's much better than UAV LiDAR from above. It's that somewhere in between, but also as Nicolas makes the point that it's integrated. You can take the LiDAR system off, then you can walk around with it, put it on a vehicle, and clip it onto a commercially available UAV. That stuff's coming. It's not operational right now, but I think that's happening very quickly because there's so much commercial interest in it. If there's a big commercial interest in being able to do that, then it happens very quickly, and it's happening now.
Thank you. I think what we should also not forget is on all these technologies, of course, there's all very North American, European based, and you have access to this there. But an important aspect of GEO Trees should also be how to bring these technologies to the people in these tropical countries, and how can we transfer this knowledge to these people, especially when you talk to donors like Bezos or whoever it is. I think they make also very clear that the money should not flow to some northern countries developing their own technology. They're really interested to bring these technologies to the local people and to train them how to use it. And I think there we also need to think a bit how to cover this aspect.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more kind of operational the technology is, the easier it is that people can pick it up. Than that it doesn't involve an awful lot of training and having someone who is an expert in doing TLS and has spent 5 years doing it to be able to do it. You can kind of do it off the shelf, and the prices come down very, very rapidly as well. The demo I saw was an Australian company.
Yes. Jérôme first, and then Nicolas again.
I just wanted to go back to Stuart's talk and say how grateful we are to the Bezos Earth Fund for funding us and to the Smithsonian people to having pulled that through. It's a really major feat. Hopefully this will be just the start of a successful strand of funding. We've just heard from the French government is ready to also co-fund some of these activities in Central Africa. That's a lesser amount of money, but that's significant. And we also are looking into collaboration with private donors. So that's a good, good start. The implementation stage will be critical. So we really need to build up a task force that will be collaborative and efficient. And that's something we need to discuss collaboratively.
Yes, I think you touched on an important point. Asking for money is good, but once you get the money, you also have to bring it to the ground and you have to really implement it, which is another challenge. Nicolas?
Was just to comment on what you said about bringing the technology to the partners in the south, and I think that's what we've been trying to do. Alvaro and Stefan Momo, they're actually PhD students from the south who have been working with these technologies and up to the stage of publication in international papers. So I don't see why not, even with less off-the-shelf technology, but it's really a work that we have to do in the south and with the southern partners. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. There's no point. You already have the satellites in the skies if you want to be disconnected from the ground. But when we work there, we work with people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. There was one more comment.
Yes, thank you. Interesting concept. Just hear it for the first time. I was wondering if once I understand that all the data are acquired from different sensors, and will there be one sensor or one way to, once the data are there, to randomly select some test sites or some, I don't know, some areas to check the data in a uniform way?
Thank you. Part of the question is about the data management plan after acquisition, I suppose. And this is a really important point, one that we have not really touched upon in these discussions. It's been more technical. We need to work a lot. There is a lot of expertise already in the networks and in different groups about converting this inventories into above ground biomass estimates. Once we have this and once they are available on a public website and also on the map, on the multi-mission analysis platform, thank you very much, which is the NASA ESA platform, we'll be able to jointly test these ideas that, do we need all of the data, part of the data, that's a more practical aspect related to the actual validation of the biomass products of these missions.
Wait.
And I am Said, Clément Albinet, who is leading the map, is just telling me that this is already accessible. This website is already accessible on the map.
So I saw that Sasan was raising his hand already a while ago, and afterwards Tui. Yes, follow up.
Yeah, just one. You said about biomass. There will be also forest height available?
Yes.
Okay.
Through LiDAR, I mean, one important component of this whole GEO Trees activities is not only to collect biomass plot data, but also airborne LiDAR data. So through this, you get height estimates as well. Yes.
Thank you.
Sasan?
Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to congratulate GEO Trees for getting their first significant funding. And I also would like to emphasize the model that GEO Trees is using and also what Isro Anup presented, that collecting these data sets, combining them with the airborne data, and also making them available to the community, both in terms of validations of the Earth observation systems and maybe other applications. So having said that, my question to Stuart is, you showed a beautiful map of 11,000 some plots globally, and in the tropics, especially in Amazon, it's just a lot. I'm sure some of these plots are not necessarily useful for Earth observation validations, but some would be. And the question is this process of having 30 sites, and it's a long process to really initiate more plot observation on the ground, even though there might be funding coming in. Do you see at all in near future there would be some of these plots that already exist would become available to the community, not just on the biomass values, but the same similar model that GEO Trees is using? Because that can help a lot for validations across the globe. There are already a lot of plots, like the Smithsonian plots exist, which are extremely well established, and some other groups have nice plots. So is there a way that those plots also become available to the community?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sasan, and one we've thought about a lot over the last few years. And I think it revolves around really an important question as to how do partners in the tropics benefit, and how do they participate in a way that's fair and equitable to them. I think there's a great deal of interest in collaborating. What we've found with this alliance of tropical plot networks is there's a great deal of willingness and excitement about collaborating in that when people feel like there's real value in their own participation. And so insofar as the Earth observation community can do things like this GEO Trees initiative and really engage and illustrate direct benefits locally, then I think that it's going to be a no-brainer. It's going to be quite straightforward. But unfortunately, the history it tends to be somewhat exploitative. You know, there tends to be a history. There is a very significant history of helicopter science where the tropical people have been kept out of many of these major initiatives. And so unless they're engaged in these initiatives in a real way, and that's what I was talking about, you know, real fellowships, real workshops, real interchange between the ecological community and the Earth observation community, I think that's the way we should go about it, in my view. And that's the way it will be successful, I'm sure, if we can do more of that kind of thing. GEO Trees is not going to do it all, for sure, but at least, you know, we should be making an impact as we study tropical ecosystems.
Thank you. Tui, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you very much for the tremendous effort that Jerome and the GEO Trees team is making. It's since 2 years, and we could see the result now. Okay, my comment is technical. So one of the objectives of the spaceborne missions are to quantify the forest regrowth, meaning that we need to quantify precisely the low biomass range. Or if I see that in the inventory of Anup there's a low biomass, and also in forest plantation there are low biomass block, but in for the ecologist community, you are more focused on major forest plot, and then on the plot starting with the DBH 10 centimeters, for example. And we lack of small biomass, or regrow range of forest in tropical forest. So should we say something to the community to do it, to find a way to do it, not from allometry, but I don't know how. Yeah.
I think Jerome wanted to answer.
I could answer this one. It's a really important question, and one that was actually asked by the Bezos Earth Fund as to what type of forests we would include in this sampling scheme. We obviously don't want to only have mature forests. We want to have all sorts of forest types and forest degradation levels. And the fact that we are scaling up from a few plots to the entire landscape. Even in the tropics, there are very few places in the world where a 1,000 hectare stretch of land is purely mature forest. It's very hard to find, actually, these days. So we will find all sorts of forest types, degradation levels, and we're pretty confident that we will cover this variety of landscapes. The short answer is yes, we've taken this into account and we will have this information. For this secondary forest, disturbed forest, it's even more important to have a plan of revisit every 5 years. So remember, the plan is not only to finance the measurements of the plots once, but every 5 years into the future.
Anoop, I saw you raised. Oh, you first, and then Anoop.
Yeah, Klaus, I'd just like to add one thing to what Jerome said. And when in each of the GeoTrees sites, there'll be 10 hectares of plot data being used for the analysis. It inevitably will be the case that those 10 hectares will span some sort of topographic heterogeneity, some kind of soil heterogeneity, which will be helpful because there'll be variation in biomass across those gradients, as we've shown many times with the Forest Geo Network, and actually Nicolas' work probably as well. So that will be also an essential part of each GeoTree site.
Thank you. Anoop, did you raise your hand? Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't raise my hand.
You didn't. Okay. Yes, I mistook it. Okay. There's one more final question because I think at 6 o'clock we have to close here. So we allow one more. Yes.
Yes, that's good to, on behalf of the term, come to join this session, and also got a couple questions from the Mark ground. I think the GeoTree has picked up a few sites from all the 10 sites, about 11. So what's your, how did you pick up these sites? Maybe I just for short, because the term fund maybe outside got more information available or is under their terms priority. So whether it could be adjusted. This is one, and also they said that they have been prepared to see, walking through the request to uplift the available information so far. So
you want to answer, or well, on the site selection? So Nicolas did a great job at the very beginning of GeoTrees, where he looked at all the available sites, and then he looked how representative these sites are, and we selected the sites based on this representative model, and that's published, so you can comment on that. Nevertheless, for example, when we talked to Tern, we had a meeting with Tern, with the local ecologists, and we presented this work to them, and they are now looking on this list that we have selected, and they bring in their local knowledge, and we will refine this selection, of course.
That's good.
And the second question was?
That's about the fund allocation that will be allocated to each site, or we are considering
I think some of these funds come with certain conditions. So, for example, I think the Bezos Fund was very clear that it should be spent in the countries of the south, in tropical countries, which is the main thing. So they said it should not go to North America, Europe, Australia, which have their own funding schemes. Other funds might be a different situation. So it always comes with the funding that comes in, how you can spend it at the end. Huh? Okay, I think we have to come to an end. We have to leave the room here. Thank you again for joining. It was a very good experience. Thank you for the comment. It was good discussions. We plan to do this more often in the coming months because I think things are moving very fast now, and we want to keep you updated, and we also want to have the feedback. And I also hope that in the next meetings we can also bring in more people from the ecological community working on the ground, contributing to these discussions, which will be very important. Thank you. Thank you for the people online, for staying online, and thank you for the people here in the room for staying here. It is recorded, by the way. And it is recorded, so what? Okay, so we can make it public. Okay, so this will be made, shared with everyone after the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.